I will call to order the City of Portage Planning Commission meeting for Monday, December 5th. If you would stand and say the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Monroe, could you call roll?
Tom Cherry,
Here.
Gina Geishurst,
Here.
Sam LeBoy,
Here.
Charles Meyer, Hortensia Moreno,
Here.
Charles Thompson,
Here.
Melissa Weidenbach, Kevin Witherspoon, Denise Little.
Here. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes? And if there are no additions or corrections, may I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Monroe, if you could call our first order of business.
Madam Chairman, before we get to that, we do have a report tonight. What we would like to review with the Plan Commission is are the 2023 Plan Commission dates. And I believe that they've all been sent to you for your review. There's a couple dates that are proposed to move off of the first Monday of the month, including January 4th, July 10th, and September 6th. January 4th, because Monday falls on the observed New Year's Day. July 10th because of the conflict with Independence Day on the 4th. We would be having the meeting on July 3rd, and then the September 6th meeting moving to Wednesday to move past September 4th and Labor Day.
Thank you.
Okay. And do we need to take any action on this?
Yeah, you need to approve it.
So we would need to take action on this tonight so that this would become the published meeting schedule for 2023.
May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
We have a motion. Do you want to repeat the motion? We have a motion and a second. Roll.
Tom Cherry,
Yes.
Gina Geis-Hurst,
Yes.
Sam LeBoy,
yes,
Charles Meyer, Hortensia Moreno,
Yes.
Charles Thompson,
Yes.
Kevin Witherspoon, Denise Little.
Yes.
Thank you.
Could you call our first?
First item under old business is Z0522 Security Door Inc., care of Todd Leith and Katie Cup of Hepner, Wagner, and Evans, 103 East Lincoln Way, Valparaiso, Indiana, requesting a change of zoning from R2 Low Density Residential to LI Light Industrial for 19.15 acres plus or minus on the east side of Samuelson Road, south of Interstate 8090, Indiana Toll Road, between Silver Cloud Drive and County Road 875 North.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Todd Leith. I'm here on behalf of the petitioner Security Door. Bryce Pickering from the company joins me as well. As you recall, we were here at the last meeting seeking a zoning change to light industrial for this property, for an expansion of the existing property. As we showed you at that time, we have the property in yellow is the subject property. The existing site is in red, and oddly, it is in the county jurisdiction, and it is zoned light industrial. So we were trying to extend that light industrial zoning in the city, in the yellow area. Further south, we had proposed some written commitments, and we've made some changes to address the concerns that we heard, I believe, at the last meeting. It's a single site, can't be multiple developments on the property. It's 19 acres in size, so it could certainly accommodate that. But the goal that the petitioner, Bryce's company, would like to do is just to enlarge their building, build a new separate facility, and do that. And so that's our request. The other concerns with regard to a robust buffer and working with the city on particular access points to the 19 acres are all addressed in that written commitment as well. We've circulated that to staff, and we would like your approval to move forward, subject to the agreement for written commitments, with a favorable recommendation to the City Council.
Thank you. I will now open to questions from the commission. I do have a couple questions. The minimum square footage is 120,000 square feet in the standards.
In light industrial?
Yes. That's 2.75 acres.
That is not something that staff nor I have discussed.
Are you just pointing out that there's a maximum standard?
That would be very odd, but
Yeah, I believe it's is a text error a number of years ago that's been annotated and corrected, so that should read maximum.
That's a big difference. The other question I have is about the height. I guess what I'm asking, are you looking to build a structure that's similar in Ameriplex?
No. Most of the buildings in Ameriflex are precast concrete. This is gonna be a pre-engineered building. A pre-engineered metal building.
And height of the building?
Eve height, we're still working on that, but I believe it was going to be around 24 feet or so, because we will have an overhead crane inside.
Okay. Some of the other questions I have, with what was turned in with your amendment, is that what it's? Like a truck freight terminal is one of the items.
That's excluded. That's an exclusion.
Okay.
So we can do all of the things that your ordinance provides, except the list of 9 things that are on that.
Okay. My apologies, because I'm thinking, what about the frost law?
Right.
There's no way you're going to get down that road. Any questions?
I think one of the questions we asked last month was about the lighting that was going to be used.
The lighting, as far as the exterior lighting goes, we've never even got that far yet. The lighting that we have on our
So
current property
we
is
don't want some of
LED.
these things.
I'm not sure.
This is off,
Are you
but that's-
referencing light pollution? Yeah, we haven't even discussed anything like that at all. We
I like my list.
have any preliminary plans. I haven't gotten any
And if they go
engineering
with
done.
it, I'm still gonna
This
recommend
was
this
the
list.
first step in the process.
As far as fugitive lighting to the east, where the residential, where the homes are, that's hundreds and hundreds of feet away, and we've committed to do a robust buffer there. So we're gonna have plantings and screening along there, regardless.
Thank you.
And they do have lights that don't go into other lots,
Exactly.
and that would be part of our requirements.
Do you have an objection of prohibiting billboards from being installed on the parcel?
I do not.
I'm not sure that that's an allowable use to begin with, but
I don't think so.
I'd refer everybody to the staff report. It's in there because it is.
we can add billboards to that list in the agreement. Is that in the sign ordinance, or is that?
It's in the development standards for signs, and billboards are permitted in the LI zoning district.
Because it's not listed as the,
Correct.
in the
It's-
table
yes.
of uses.
Yep, that's correct.
Any other questions?
I know Counselor presented a list of restricted uses in the written commitments that he's provided. Also, you have a staff report before you, prepared per your request to look at considered permitted uses, special exception uses, and in the most recent example, signs in the zoning district. So I believe that what you'll see is the list of permitted special exception uses proposed by staff is different than what is proposed by the petitioner, and would ask you to consider what we've submitted to you as a staff report and what they have proposed in the written commitments.
AJ, was that an updated staff report or is that from the original?
This is the updated, there's an updated memo that was distributed or dated November 28th of 2022. Should be a one-page document. And staff kept their focus of the memo on what the Plan Commission asked us to consider. We did not get into lighting or any of those other things that were previously discussed. The memo specifically focused on what you asked for at the conclusion of last month's meeting, which was to offer a recommendation of permitted uses, special exception uses, and we felt it also important to bring up signs because that would be a use in the zoning district. And while it's not called out on the two-page spread in Article 3, it is, however, discussed in development standards in Article 6.
So Attorney Leith, you're going to add that billboards won't be permitted?
We can do that, yes.
Did you submit a list of 9 uses that you were proposing?
Yes, we did.
Was that?
That's in the agreement for written commitments, and I don't know if you received our update from the last time we were here, but we added 4 more, I think, to the list of excluded uses, and now a 5th one, with the billboard outdoor advertising. I'll just review the 9 if you.
There's,
So your ordinance, 90-3.43, lists several allowable uses. From that list, we're excluding truck sales and service, a truck freight terminal, truck sales and service center, animal boarding, outdoor uses of animal boarding, concrete asphalt production facility, recreational vehicle sales facility, dry cleaning service, commercial, and food and beverage production. That pretty much leaves wholesale facility, a warehouse and distribution facility, light industrial assembly and distribution, light industrial processing and distribution, general industrial production, and some office, warehouse, and government facility.
we would like to, or I would suggest that we limit it to office showroom contractor, office warehouse contractor, light industrial assembly and distribution, and then special exceptions, above ground utility facility and outdoor storage. Would that be agreeable?
So the struggle is what's allowed, what's in my list, as Ms. Little and kind of got reversed, and I did the same thing this afternoon. So what, from the list that you just read, are they exclusions or allowed uses?
The ones I read were allowed.
Okay, so can you repeat those? I apologize.
Office showroom contractor, office warehouse contractor, light industrial assembly and distribution, and then special exceptions, above ground utility facility and outdoor storage. Accessory use only.
As special exceptions, above ground utility and outdoor use, no.
Outdoor
Outdoor
storage.
accessory.
Yes.
So only 2 special exceptions? And 3 permitted uses?
Yes.
I guess I would,
No, that's it, you just read it.
I would push back on the light industrial processing and distribution being excluded. And maybe there's more, we're kind of, Bryce, you and I are, I have the original staff report, but I'm at a disadvantage because I don't have the updated staff report. So we're kind of doing this on the fly.
There were some negative industries that could come in with processing that the staff recommended against.
Such as?
Tina, do you have an extra copy that you could give to Attorney Leith?
Here, just give them this, you don't need to run upstairs.
And then go ahead and take a minute and get collected on it.
They can't tell me what it is that they're referring to.
You see,
What it is that they're referring to that they don't want in there.
see, they're taking out the light industrial processing and distribution, but we have the assembly and distribution.
So what's the difference between processing and assembly? Can I ask that?
Yeah,
I guess I'd need some clarification on what question that you're asking as far as what you're wanting not in there in the future as far as processing goes. I know you're not really looking at it as far as our use, but in case that years down the road we're not there, you want to limit what can go in there. I guess I need some clarification on what it is that you're referring to. It says processing, but it doesn't say what processing means. Is there something that you don't want processed in there, or is it just a blanket?
AJ's looking at the definition.
He's going to help us.
Do you think it's under, which word do you think it's under? It's always funny.
Yeah. The difference is it's the earlier check, it's really the
So am I being asked to read the definitions of the 2 proposed land uses?
To explain the
Because
process.
I'm going to have a hard time giving examples. So one process is taking a raw material, processing it to make it something else so that it can be involved in a process or a new
widget.
use, right?
An assembly.
So that's right, so it goes from a processing of a material to the assembly of that into something else. Where assembly is, it's already there, and it's then assembled and then distributed. So the process adds a step to that, to what that use could be. So they use metal pipe that is then assembled for a gate, for a fence. Adding the process to that, they could actually make the iron pipe on the site.
From
Then
scratch.
from scrap, assemble it, put it on a truck and send it somewhere. So we're trying to take away the effect of that part of that process. That's the staff's recommendation.
Correct. And then you also, with the processing, could have waste.
As far as that example goes, as far as the processing, I have no problem adding that to the list of non-use. We build fences and gates and we work on doors. If my children want to worry about that 20, 30 years from down the road, they can come back and worry about that then.
And I think that's the thing that and Bryce, during last month's meeting, I think one of the things that intrigued the commission about the proposal is who you all are as a business entity. you're a known commodity. We had no public response in terms of they're the worst neighbors ever. Most of the commission knows your operation and what you do. And the hesitation, I think, of the commissioners was if it wasn't this petitioner, and if this were just somebody else coming in with this sort of zoning request, there was a lot of hesitation. And so to assist in the Plan Commission's deliberation, at the end of the last meeting, they asked, we put together a list of uses that would be acceptable at the time, based on the conversation we had, based on who you are, and based on what Attorney Leith had presented as what you're proposing to do on the property. I agree with the petitioner and Mr. Pickering that if down the road there's a future thing that doesn't strictly fit into what's agreed upon tonight, we can cross that bridge 10, 20, 30 years from now. But I think what I understood in leaving the last meeting was to develop a list of permitted uses that would help solidify the understanding of what this petitioner is requesting so that the Plan Commission could consider making a positive and favorable recommendation to the Common Council for their consideration.
Correct.
The items I guess then to summarize, the items listed on the staff report, the updated staff report dated November 28th, start out with allowable uses. There are 3 as permitted and 2 as special exceptions. And then the prohibition against signs from the sign ordinance, all of those are acceptable.
Thank you for letting us sort this out. Any additional questions?
I've got a question. How many shifts are you anticipating running over there? I mean,
One.
Just one? Okay.
I would say
Anticipate it'll go to 2 or 3?
No. We sell, service, install fence and doors for commercial and industrial contractors, or for the mills, the refinery. I'd like to think that we're an ideal neighbor for the fact that when everybody's at work, we're there. When they come home from work, we're gone. Except for maybe November, December, we're not even there on Saturdays and Sundays. The fourth quarter is typically our busiest, and we are working 6 to 7 days a week now, but we're not there. We go there, pick up our trucks, and we're out on job sites.
I understand. And then one more quick follow-up question. How would I guess the lighting is something that you haven't necessarily decided on. Maybe the height of the facility, you're not necessarily sure. But with the lighting, the noise, the height of the building, the traffic patterns related to this, my question would be, how is that going to affect the residential area right across the street from this particular property?
Well, I would say that this particular property is gonna be farther away from the neighborhood than where we currently are, and we haven't had any complaints that I'm aware of since we've been there for the last 7 years.
If no additional questions, may I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
It's a favorable recommendation.
So it's a favorable recommendation, then we need to delineate which proposed set of uses we're using in the motion. So the staff report of November 28th updated, if that's the point of the motion.
And the other written commitments previously provided.
So,
Those.
make a motion to approve the update from November 28th.
To go along with the proposed written commitments.
I'll make a motion to approve to go along with the written commitment from November 28th.
So it's a motion to approve or send a favorable recommendation to the city council with the proposed written commitments, with the only modification being the staff report from November 28th, the updated staff report from November 28th. Is that the motion?
Yes.
Second agree?
Seconded.
Could you call roll?
Tom Cherry,
Yes.
Gina Geis-Hurst,
Yes.
Sam LaBoy,
Yes.
Charles Meyer. Hortensia Moreno,
Yes.
Charles Thompson,
Yes.
Kevin Witherspoon,
Yes.
Denise Little,
Yes.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Give me a call tomorrow.
and then these. You're welcome, bud. So you're here.
Could you call our next order of business?
Z0622, Olthoff Homes, care of Todd Leith and Katie Cuff of Hepner, Wagner, and Evans, 103 East Lincoln Way, Valparaiso, Indiana, requesting a change of zoning from R2, low-density residential, to M1, multifamily residential, and M2, multifamily residential, for 32.73 acres plus or minus south of Lute Road between East Bend and Roswell Drive.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name hasn't changed in the last half hour. I'm still Todd Leith. I'm here on behalf of the petitioner in this matter as well. Olthoff Homes, Ed Rechtenwall joins me from Olthoff to take us through hopefully an explanation of our request to rezone the Lute family property on South Lute Road. This has been before you a couple times, and as before, this was a case that was heard here on November 7th, and there was quite a bit of discussion. At that time, I think there were a handful of concerns that I'm going to summarize as the number of homes or density on the property, buffering, and how the neighboring uses are affected, traffic, Augusta Boulevard stubs into this property on the south, and your thoroughfare plan anticipates and frankly requires that it be extended to Lute Road, and pedestrian access to the school to the east with a walking path or trail there. At the meeting on November 7th, I showed you this slide. The property in question is the yellow parcel. I've been doing land use for some time, and the number of neighboring districts abutting a property, this has got to be a record. We've got multifamily, we've got single family, we've got the institutional school, we've got Menards on the south, we've got vacant office commercial in the green on the southwest. Just an incredibly complex, in my opinion, parcel to pick a zoning classification that fits. So there was a failed, as you know, in some recent history, a failed attempt to do a residential development, and the property came back to the Lute family. And in September of 2021, I appeared in front of the Planning Commission and City Council on behalf of the owners, the current owners today, the historical owners for many, many, many years, to rezone this same parcel R2, because it was zoned OC, like the green, like the west. And we did that, and I looked at my notes and I reviewed the minutes of that meeting from September of 2021. And we did that with the full disclosure, and I think everybody understood, that the purpose of putting it to the R2 was to find a buyer who would be a residential developer and not someone who wanted to do an office, commercial type of development. We thought that the residential development was more marketable. We could find a buyer. So we did that. We changed the zoning with the blessing of the city council to the R2 zoning classification. It worked. Olthoff is here, a residential developer. But I don't think that I recommended or it was suggested that it would be the R2 classification. We were just simply trying to find a developer who would come and invest an interest and their skills to create a plan. This is the problem, this map right here. Because the property is so diverse in all of its buffered areas, this makes a single-family development difficult. It makes an office commercial development difficult. Frankly, it makes any development difficult because of the diversity on, frankly, a smaller parcel with so many buffering uses. So we came to you with a plan to have a mixed residential, townhomes and duplex lots, paired cottage homes that looked like this. And we heard those concerns, the pedestrian connection to the school, the amount of homes, traffic, Augusta Boulevard, and buffering to the neighboring properties, those 5 different types of uses. So we left here hearing those concerns and came back with 3 different concept plans, changes to the plans, if you will. And I distributed prior to the commencement of tonight's meeting a handout of these 3 slides. But we've got a different type of mix. Is it 40 homes or 60 homes or 80 homes? Of course not, it's not. We started out last time at 166 homes. And in differing degrees, the 3 concept plans that we've shared with you have a different mix of the paired cottage homes and the townhomes. We think that we've done a better job buffering the single family to the north and east, and the 2 homes that, actually there's 3 homes, but we already buffered the northwest corner very well, I think, with the existing plan. But we've added a row of the cottage homes to buffer the townhomes where the density gets higher. So in all 3 of these classifications, we think we've touched, in one degree or another, each of the 4 concerns. One plan may do a better job of reducing density, but another one may do a better job of buffering. So what we'd like to do is kind of get more feedback from you today. Talk about your concerns. Tell me which ones you like. We don't necessarily have to land on A, B, or C. Maybe we do a blend of B and A, or C and A, or what have you, what we like. Our goal then is to hear your concerns. The staff says to me, it's all fine and dandy, you come in with the plan, but if we change the zoning, you can do within the different areas, the M1 and the M2, as we draw the line on the rezoning, you can do anything, you don't have to follow your concept. So, hear your concerns, and then just as we did with the previous case with security door, we can lock in the concerns on the concept plan. We'll have no more than X homes. will have no, and of those, so many will be the cottage homes, so many will be the townhomes. And any of the other concerns. The walking trail to the school, that can be part of the commitment, that in order to have the zoning, that is constructed, that is made mandatory, if you will. It's a condition, and it becomes enforceable, not just to Altoff Homes, because it's gonna be approved by city council, signed by Altoff, signed by the city, recorded against the title to the property. So if Altoff ultimately buys the property and wants to start building and says, no, we want to sell it to another developer or some other property owner, they're going to have the same commitment because it's recorded against the property. So it's binding and runs with the land. So that's our goal, that's our hope tonight, is to go through the three different concepts and hopefully dial in as to what we can do, what is most concerning, we can address in written commitments. If you just say, you know, 150 homes or 160 homes is way too much, then I'm not sure that we can find common ground, but we want to be able to hear the concerns, because I think that the south part of this property, the west part of this property, it's multifamily in my opinion. That's where the multifamily is on the west. I don't think anybody wants to live in a permanent situation in a $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000 house with Menards on the other side of a stockade fence. So I think this is a good, these plans are a good compromise to a very difficult parcel that has so many things going on just on the other side of the property line, all the way around. Happy to answer your questions and try and find this common ground that I keep referring to.
Before we open to questions, would you like to explain the difference in the three concept plans?
So the first one has a mixture of 43 cottage homes. This is A. 118 townhomes. It's got a density of 4.95 units per acre. It adds some driveways. Frankly, they all do, because why? Because we've added the paired patio homes into the project. All three concept plans increase the number of those. This one does a really good job, again, of buffering the existing single-family along Lute Road and to that north and east. Concept Plan B has 44 cottages and 104 townhomes. Density is about 4.5 now per acre. That's an 11% decrease in the density that we had originally proposed. Again, we have more driveways on Augusta. I think this one does, just as the other one, buffering the single-family homes in the north and in the northeast. And then lastly, Concept C has 56 cottage homes and 100 townhomes, and the density is 4.83 units per acre. And this has a newer type of townhome. Altoff hasn't, have you developed this type before, or is it?
This is a new, solely new concept that we're coming up with. It's more of a front-loaded townhome type building, so. I know there were some concerns with alleys and things like that, so. we just decided to
The
add-
other ones were, I think, both A and B have rear-loaded garages for the townhomes,
Correct.
which I think is a neat look. It seems to be popular with the rear-loaded. It seems to be popular. I think it's a neat street look. Frankly, it's clean. You don't see garage doors, but, you know, you see garage doors in every community. I don't feel so bad. I did that.
You know, one thing point out about concept B, and the difference between concept A and B is that B does limit, for the most part, more driveways off of Augusta. So where concept A, we have a few of those pairs that kind of run up from lots 1 down to 5. Those are all shown as fronting. Concept B turns a couple of those and takes them off of the Augusta corridor. So it, again, tries to restrict the access there to the best of our ability. But as Mr. Leaf mentioned, I mean, all these have significant buffering all the way around. You know, we tried to keep this as, you know, a transitional type zoning project where the heavier uses to the south and west are transitioning to the north and east. So.
And I know this is in the future, but what about brick?
So we have many different front elevations on our project. We'd probably be willing to discuss adding a certain portion of brick. Most of these, with a variation in units, would have some type of brick on it, probably a knee wall type elevation or whatnot. But we do have many. We're more than willing to discuss elevations if necessary as inclusions of, you know, this concept or rezone as well.
Do you intend to put on-street parking too? One of your exhibits doesn't show any parking.
Right, so the front-loaded one, which is concept C, those buildings are pushed back a little bit further, so they almost have, in essence, a full depth driveway. So there would be 2 parking spots there, and then, you're right, it probably doesn't show enough guest parking, so there would be some consideration having to be made for guest parking on that concept. Now, the rear-loaded ones on A and B, obviously there's some spots there for guest parking. Most of the parking in these concepts with the alley product is off-street, not on-street, so. Yeah, C, there could potentially be some on-street parking, though that's really more of an engineering type detail that we haven't really gotten into yet with this concept.
Ed makes a good point. The buffering, which is the green space strip around even the Parrot Cottage, is 60 feet wide. That's pretty robust. That's usually you're talking about 20, 25, and on the high end 30, and this is double that. So 60 feet wide is an extremely large buffer.
I do like the rear loading concept. I think Augusta is going to be pretty heavily traveled. So taking those driveways off Augusta, I think is a great idea.
Will Augusta go through the Menards complex?
It already does. It stubs at the end of Menards, or just to the west of Menards. So it's there now. So we would pick it up and bring it through to Loop.
That's why I think the rear loaded is important, because everyone in Savannah Heights, those areas are going to be cutting down Augusta to go to 6. So keeping the driveways off of Augusta is a great idea.
Safer, too. Safer, definitely.
What is the approximate space between the townhomes?
Well, again, this is more of a concept plan, so
Correct.
the elevations aren't, or the dimensions aren't exactly honed in, but we usually leave between 25 and 30 feet in a typical project, between the buildings themselves. It's what we typically provide.
I'm kind of migrating towards B. Is that connection to the school, it's going to be a asphalted walking path? Is that kind of what you had in mind?
Well, truthfully, we committed to we're showing a connection, whether it's concrete or asphalt. I would think we would probably do asphalt, but it would be some type of hard surface, yeah.
What is the difference between B and C with the cottage homes as far as the size of the properties?
Size, all the lot sizes are pretty much similar. It's just reconfiguring kind of the street layout. So, on B, you'll notice that we kind of have 2 rows of townhomes back to back, south of there. And so, C, which is again that front-loaded, new townhome concept, that row of townhomes is missing, and that allowed us to come into there and bring a cul-de-sac in, and provide a little more, paired cottage in that area. So concept B, you can see there's 2 rows on the south side of lot 15. There's basically 2 rows of townhome buildings, two rows of rear-loaded townhomes. And if you go to concept C, there's 2 rows, but they're shifted further south, so that it allows that cul-de-sac to come in and pick up those additional paired cottage lots.
Your petition has legal descriptions for both M1 and M2, so.
We would have to change the legal descriptions based upon what we're describing. It was based upon our original submission.
So we would have to have those before we make a recommendation before
Well,
proceeding.
our request is to come back in January anyhow. So that'll give us an opportunity to get the legal descriptions based upon the chosen concept plan and draft an agreement for written commitments to lock in the concept plan.
I don't know if this is a question I can ask, but is there a staff preference to A, B, or C?
Staff's recommendation is to deny the change of zoning request.
I believe that your staff is concerned that it doesn't comply with the comprehensive plan. That's really his charge. And he'll correct me if I misstate anything, I'm sure. But again, I don't think that in 2009, when the comprehensive plan was drafted, they had anything or any appreciation for this particular piece of property. Remember what the comprehensive plan does. It draws balloons or circles around corridors and says, this is where we think office commercial should be, this is where we think R2 should be. It can dial in, don't get me wrong, but this property, if the drafters of the comprehensive plan in 2009 focused on the 5 different uses around this property, I don't think that they would find fault with our request. I'll just say it that way.
Well, I like the more cottage homes on C, but I definitely like no driveways on Augusta because that's going to be a major, major road.
I agree with you on that. I like the combination of C and B, because I like the fact of not having Augusta as a driveway.
Can you do that with your new townhomes in C? Kind of blend the two?
I mean, we can do, yeah, I mean, we can look at it and see if that'll
Sure.
work, but.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, what I'm understanding is that you're looking for maybe more, a better mix of paired cottage in there. So like concept C has about 30%, 36% paired cottage as opposed to 30% of townhomes. You're looking for maybe just a little more paired cottage on the project.
Yes.
I think if we could fix that, that would make it better. With no drives on Augusta.
We're gonna have to have some drives on Augusta up in the north off of Loop where it's narrow. Those 4 or 5 lots are,
Right,
In the
lots 1 through 4 have
Yeah.
always.
In the paired cottages?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But definitely the rear-loaded townhomes, I think, are preferred. It gives it a really clean look, as opposed to the front-loaded townhomes.
Mr. Cherry, I think you were the one that asked the question of staff on his recommendation. I think maybe if you asked the question, how would this proposal might be better, just a slightly change in language due to his charge, you might get a different response.
I will restate my question. How might this get a better response as far as planning?
Well, I think that some of the things you've discovered are, really accurate, the street, and I think you heard that from Consul, and I think you've all said it yourselves, many of you have, that the street is cleaner. It's gonna be a better street if you can push the buildings a little closer to the road. The porch begins to engage the street. There's fewer driveways. It's less cluttered. It's a better experience driving down the street, the public right of way. rear loading the garages. For me, I think one of the biggest advantages of that is the ability to, the developer to create that private outdoor space, as opposed to concept C, that sort of comes across with a little different vibe than I think we're trying to get at. So that idea of a clean public street, a private space, that rear-loaded garage, and then all the utility of that back area, I think all is leading to a really decent development type. I think that along like Lexington, that area is functioned pretty well. Number two, and whatever the desired action of the change of zoning from OC to R2 was, there was always gonna be Augusta Boulevard. Office Commercial Zoning District would have very easily been able to dictate where driveways enter and exit the throughway. In this case, it's tough. Concept B seems to limit the driveways onto Augusta Boulevard to 4. I have a little hesitancy, and I know I've mentioned this to council, on the access that would be ultimately provided to Lot 1, which is the building closest to the intersection of Augusta and Loop, because I believe the traffic counts are gonna warrant a 3-lane section, a left and a through right at Augusta, opposing a southbound Augusta lane. In concept B, there is a buffer provided along Loop Road that allows that driveway for Lot 1 to move a little further south. So the developer has taken into consideration that in a way that probably will make the intersection of Loop and Augusta Boulevard work out. As it relates to the open space, it's really nice that we suggest here that it'd be great if there was a connection to the Portage High School campus. I would recommend you seek their advice. It's theirs to plan. They may have a reason why it's not a good idea to have residential neighborhood access to their campus. They may feel completely the other way, but I would recommend at least some level of conversation with the school system so that we're not planning connections and pathways across their property. The buffer yard along Georgian Park, as council and the developers proposed, it's a pretty significant buffer. 60 feet is a real buffer. So I think as I listened to what you all said last month and assisted Dina in the preparation of the minutes, taking into account all of what you said, all of what was previously discussed, I would agree that concept B is probably closest to what you all are desiring and appears to be the best version of a development proposal. I think there's, and Council and I have been talking about this, there's a few of these townhome units that might be a little cramped in, but why I think Attorney Leith is recommending a number as opposed to like that building goes right there is because there will be some engineering. These are planar lines with thick pens, so the lines are gonna move ever so slightly one way or the other. So that it may be possible to look at some different configuration. I'm sure that Mr. Rechtenwald's planners have considered the amount of detention that is needed. It's illustrated on the document, but it may not be that much. So I think that, anyway, there's some tight areas, but overall, I think listening to everything I've heard, that concept B is probably the one that takes into account what I've heard you all talk about last month, this month, and other conversations we've had in the past with other developers, fairly consistent with what you've suggested to them during concept plan review of their plan developments.
As well as your concerns?
Those are my recommendations on how this could get better.
Questions from the petitioner?
I don't think so. You know, I'm sensing a consensus that we're falling to B and C, mostly B. We've heard the concern about driveways on Augusta. We can't eliminate those, as I said, but I think that we can minimize them as best as we possibly can. That leg that goes up to Loot Road just can't be utilized without
Right.
the pair of cottage homes there.
No, I think we're good. We appreciate the comments, and we are more than willing to come back next month and make a blend here of the B and C concepts and see if that hits the mark. Sounds like we're getting closer, which.
Thank you.
We do appreciate your time and consideration, and certainly your comments and understanding. We thought it best to come have this discussion. Then I've got my job cut out for me. I'll get some documents to your staff, and that way we're not trying to press you or city council or anyone until it's all right there. So, very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's that? She sent them, but I don't know if I have them yet.
We're ready for our new business.
The first item under new business is miscellaneous item zero.
Who reaches out to the school regarding that concern?
The, whoever the board directs to do that, or you could do, I would be probably directing Mr. Leaf to reach out to the school corp to see whether or not, how the school corp feels about the connection.
What I'm going to do in the agreement for written commitments is to provide that we will commit to build that. We'll design, or we'll dictate that it's gonna be hard surface, asphalt or concrete. It'll be so many feet wide, and it'll go in a generally consistent area as we showed on, frankly, all three of them, subject to the school corporation giving consent and permission. If they don't, then we don't have to build it. If we get along and we wanted to do that, then we'll seek the school corporation's consent. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We're ready.
This is the first item under new business. This is a miscellaneous item 0922. RCJJ Development LLC and Lawton Development, care of Steve Kill, 14400 Lakeshore Drive, Cedar Lake, Indiana, requesting sketch plan review and comment from the Plan Commission to create a 165 lot development to construct paired patio homes / duplexes and a park located at approximately east of Wilshire and south of US Highway 6, containing 54 acres.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hello, everybody. This is our first visit here since the DRC committee meeting. The property is probably, especially for Miss Little and a few others, I'm sure everybody's kind of familiar with the property that we have here. After a lot of listening to the community, we have really altered our land plan here. we are proposing, the property is currently zoned M1, which are 2-unit buildings. So we currently have that zoning. We are going to ask that we go through a zone change to add the PD designation to the M1. And what we're proposing with that is we're proposing wider lots, we're proposing larger side yards to basically try to conform to what the community is asking for. So what it comes down to is we're requesting 152 lots, is what is shown. We're asking that the zoning be changed to PD M1. The lot size will be 66 foot wide by 120 foot deep. Lot coverage approximately 45%. And what this will do, this will allow us to get to 8-foot side yards, which we believe is a very comfortable side yard, and that seems to be what the community is really concerned with, the Planning Commission, Common Council, staff. So that kind of is what we're proposing here. Along with that, that will allow us to go ahead and develop a really nice park. And the park, the way we develop the parks, we create our homeowners associations. We would then propose to dedicate the park to the city. However, all maintenance responsibilities would then fall back to the HOA. Because we know the park department is taxed the way it is for maintenance of their park, so we definitely would like a park in the project. We have some challenges to the site. Obviously, we have some commercial along 6 that backs up, you know, the back of the commercial is, it's difficult, to say the least. We do have the trailer park over to the west. We have vacant property to the east, and then, of course, we have some development there to the south, minimal. We have proposed 1 connection to Route 6, 1 connection to the south, and stub to the east. Now, again, this is our concept plan. We're at zoning, so we haven't done any engineering, and we haven't looked at that real closely. But like I said, this is kind of unique in the fact that we already have the zoning there. We're just simply to ask you to go to a PUD designation with that. And I've supplied AJ with a zoning commitment. I supplied him with all of the, it's what I call a data sheet for Sandy Trails, which is what we're proposing to call this. We would incorporate this development plan and into our commitment, as well as all of the written commitments that are contained in the zoning commitment that I supplied to AJ. So I think we have a project here that I believe to be a lot more palatable than the initial proposal. We've really curved this. We've got rid of the linear feel of this. It's designed a lot better, I believe. And like I said, in basic conformance, what I believe the city and the staff is actually looking for in the Common Council. And I would be happy to answer any questions anybody has. And I guess we're here to receive feedback as part of the process from the Planning Commission, so.
Well, this is a public hearing, so we're open to any comments.
It's not a public hearing.
Madam, yeah, if I could jump in, so, if that's okay. Some time ago, Planning Commission asked, sometimes we see plan developments and they just show up for approval. Sometime back, you asked staff to, we'd like to be involved in the process a little sooner. That's why they're here today. So the purpose of today's meeting is to, as Mr. Kill mentioned, he's provided documentation to the city in terms of written commitments, concept plans, is to receive comment and suggestions so that Mr. Kill and council can take the next step and move forward with their desired process, which is the SEEK PD overlay on an M1 zoning district. So again, review and comment, so that would be the express purpose of tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I will open it to questions from the commission.
Can you restate again why you can't go straight zoning M1?
With straight zoning for M1, we would lose a lot of the amenities, we would lose a lot of the open space, which we certainly do not want to do. We believe that we have a lot of challenges to this site, the way it is. And quite honestly, the product that we're going to build, which I presented to the staff, will fit very, very well on this size of a lot. And the PUD zoning, or the plan development zoning, PD zoning, will allow us the flexibility to obviously get this plan in, build a really nice park, maintain the park for everybody, provide open space that we would not normally be able to do with just straight zoning, which we have now. We have the straight zoning, so that allows us a lot more flexibility with our site design and the ability to do some things that we would really like to do and still maintain, you can see how we have to buffer this site. We have a lot of challenges to the west. We have a lot of challenges to the north. It's just a challenging site given what we have to deal with. So I believe the PUD allows us a lot more flexibility, and it allows you to take a look at the units that we're going to build, and we've supplied all of that. So it just provides us the flexibility we need to actually develop this site properly.
Let me give a comment to that too, because with the PUD, they do not have to go in front of the BZA. The lot size should be 9,600. They are asking for 7,920 square feet. Main floor should be 800 square feet. They are asking to make the main floor 576 square feet. 15-foot side yard setback, they're asking for 8, which is way better than the 5. Lot frontage is 80 foot. They are asking for 66 foot. So there is a huge difference in the PUD. And that's why I think staff's recommendation came back, that we should go through the normal process and not with the PUD. The major challenge on this land is the drainage to the north. And I think the difficulty with that is those properties to the north are under the county and not Portage. So I don't know what kind of guarantees, and if they're flooded more because of this property, but they're under county supervision, what are the ramifications?
Well, as you know, when you do any subdivision, you cannot increase the release rate from the subdivision, and we are well aware of that. We are well aware of what Portage's requirements are for stormwater detention. We're well aware of all that as well. We have worked pretty closely now with Luke Sherry and Dan Commenda and the staff on the other project that we have. So we're very, very, very in tune to what those are. Most of our release from this project, quite honestly, is going to be the southwest. There will be a portion of the project that does drain to the north, but the lion's share of the project is going to go to the southwest and release to the west. We've identified all of the off-site easements that we need to get our drainage over there. So I really, it's tough to get into that drainage discussion here because I simply don't have the answers from an engineering perspective. This is simply the zoning right now. So, but obviously, we've been thinking about that, is, to your point, Denise, so.
Because that was a
we-
major complaint from the public, is they're drowning.
Well, and understood. And it is it's quite possible where you see Outlot C up there, we've left all of that property there would remain commercial, but we've left it all because if there has to be additional detention up there, then we add additional detention and we hold the water back. So we have the ability on this site now, that's part of the PUD's designation, we have the ability on this site where we can construct additional detention if we do need it. And if upon engineering review, Luke determines that that is in fact needed, we understand that. So, but like I said, most of the discharge is gonna be the southwest.
Questions? Comments?
So these are going to be duplexes, not like paired cottages?
Duplex, paired cottage, the two terms would be synonymous in our case. They would be two-unit buildings.
And then there's going to be an HOA?
That is accurate, yes. Every project we do, we have an HOA component where they are going to be responsible for maintenance, all of that stuff, common area maintenance, park maintenance, the whole 9 yards. That's the one true way to make sure everything looks nice all the time.
Yeah, I don't know if you can help with the explanation, the difference with the PUD in going through our normal process.
The PUD overlay would allow the petitioner to craft their own development standards for the property in question.
And like I said, I think our case is a bit unique, is that we're not asking for a change of zone. We're asking to build what is allowed right now. We're just simply asking to basically do what AJ said and give you a written commitment that ties us down to what is approved. And we have no problem with that. We will definitely live with that. So we're still gonna propose to build the two-unit buildings, which we're zoned for right now. We already have the ability to do that. So we're just asking for the PUD because we have some unique challenges on this site that we believe that we can overcome with a PUD, and we need the flexibility of that. That's why we're asking for it. We're not asking to build something that's in a different zone. I'm not asking for an M3 zone or anything. I'm simply M2 or whatever. I'm simply asking for the PUD designation, which necessitates a zone change in essence.
So you're in agreement to the standards for the M1, the 800 square feet on the main floor?
I am in agreement for, to build a 1,350 square foot to 1,750 square foot unit.
Correct. But what about your main floor requirement? The M1 requirement is 800 square feet. And you're asking for 576?
I'm asking for.
Section 2.
I'm asking for 576 in.
Correct.
In letter M. That
So
is
you're
correct.
not meeting the M1 standards?
No, that's why I'm asking
Okay.
for the PUD designation
Okay.
as well. That would be accurate, yes. But the unit size itself, and again, we're asking that to be just the minimum. We have a nice range in product, in sizes of our product. So, you know, the actual home size itself, that's per unit, that's per side. That's not, that's each one, so you can multiply that times 2. And we're gonna have we'll have nice units. It's just that we do need some of that flexibility, which is why we just simply put the minimum in there, and then I gave you the range of how big the units would be, ultimately. And honestly, Denise, the reason that 576 is in there is we have to accommodate a garage. We have a garage. We have a nice.
You're building over the garage?
We have a nice 2-car garage, so a lot of our square, we're gonna build 2-story units. Right, so, you know, kind of picture it where you have to have a garage, and then where, you know, a lot of our square footage, we're gonna occupy over the entire unit, is what we're proposing. So that's where you come up with that minimum first floor. That's why that's in there. Because we're gonna do a nice 2-story unit. These won't be ranches.
What's the difference in the yard size between, so they're not on top of each other?
Well, we'll have 8-foot side yards. So we'll have 16 feet between buildings.
Gina, they went from 60-foot yards to 66. The standard is 80.
You said the standard is 80?
That's what's required for an M1.
And is there a reason why you're using 66 versus 80?
Because after listening to feedback and watching other petitioners and listening kind of with the feel of just the BZA, Plan Commission, Common Council, it seems that everybody wants a nice 8-foot side yard with 16 foot between buildings. That seems to be a very comfortable build, if you will. It matches 99% of the other communities, quite honestly. It matches a lot of your other zoning districts. I don't know how M1 got to be 15 foot, but that's fairly excessive as far as a side yard requirement. An 8-foot side yard is a very, very comfortable yard. The buildings aren't on top of each other. When you start getting 15-foot side yard, you start getting 30 foot between buildings. Well, when you look at it aesthetically, it looks like you're missing a unit between them. It almost looks like, well, why did they skip a building? It just really does not. The streetscape begins to look really odd, if you will. And that's just not the best use of the property. And quite honestly, when you have an HOA and you have full maintenance of all of these units, the maintenance now becomes cost prohibitive. I mean, think about all that yard that you have to maintain. You know, what do you do with it all? You have these giant side yards where you can do nothing in anyway. You know, you can enjoy your rear yard. What can you do on the side yard of your house? Nothing. I mean, you can do some plantings there, and that's about all you can do. But this allows you to have any kind of access you need. It allows a comfortable distance between buildings. And it's, like I said, honestly, it's a pretty standard side yard. If anything, it's on the high side.
Mr. Kelly, you said
Yes.
that 99% of the communities have that, 8-foot side yard? Okay, I've lived here in Portage in the same home for 22 years, and I can assure you that's not 99% of the housing developments here in Portage.
Oh, no, I just meant communities in general. So I didn't mean Portage.
Okay. It just, to me, I'm looking at this and it seems very crowded, and it's almost funny that outlot A, I mean, it looks kind of like a moat between what presumably the trailer park and this development. really crowded.
Do you, are you talking about Outlet A along the west property line? Outlet A is 130 feet wide.
Okay,
It's absolutely gigantic.
right.
I mean, it's,
We were just talking about buffering.
yeah, we were just talking about buffering.
Yeah, we're going over and above.
And Todd Leith had 60 foot, I'm at 130. This is full-blown pond here. This isn't a little ditch. We're talking 130 feet wide. It's gigantic. It's wider than, probably as wide as City Hall here.
But all kidding aside, it just seems like they're really, I mean, especially when you consider that these are gonna be duplexes, it just looks really, really crowded.
I agree with you on that. It does look very crowded. And I was going to ask is, are these all rented or are they owner occupied?
Yeah, we don't build anything. We simply develop the property. So everything that we do, we sell.
Will the HOA, though, have a stipulation that they're to be owner occupied? I mean, is that allowable?
The HOA, a lot of HOAs really get away from that. We have found that causes, if you stipulate to something like that, that causes problems with the Fair Housing Act. And quite frankly, it's been called out before. I've been a recipient of that in my former career, where we've done that, the Department of Justice has stepped in, and it was not
Looked upon favorably.
It was tough. Let's put it that way. It caused quite a challenge for my community and me. I had the same concern, and quite honestly, we got in big trouble for that by the U.S. Department of Justice.
I'm going back to it looking really crowded. You're saying they're going to be minimum 60 feet wide, but the M1 standard is 80 feet
66.
wide.
66.
66, but I think it says here it should be 80 feet or 40 feet per lot per half-paired patio home.
That's what the actual M1, the zoning we have now, that's what it does state, yes. We're asking for the PUD designation to alter all of that, a lot of those requirements, usually, basically all of them. And in return, we're offering to build a nice park. We're offering, again, I know you said a moat, but I guess I would take exception to that comment by telling you it's 130 feet wide. We're offering to institute an HOA. We're offering to maintain these yards and properties so it doesn't become blighted. We're offering a lot of these things as part of our commitment to you. We would prepare that zoning commitment along and attach it to this development plan, and we are committing to build generally this plan. Again, subject to engineering, would this get a little wider down here? Would detention maybe go some up here? I mean, there are some tweaks that always happen when you actually get into the hard engineering of it. But this plan generally, we're committing to. And we're committing to everything that you see in this zoning commitment. We're committing to those square footages for 2-story units, which is going to be very nice. They're each going to have a 2-car garage. And again, like I said, the side yards, right now, it requires 15 foot. And it's just, not only will not look right, it just simply doesn't make any sense. So to add the PUD designation, or in Portage's case, PD, that allows us and allows you actually more control over what we're doing. It allows the city to control this development because we have to live with these parameters that are agreed to as part of our development plan. I mean, with pure M1 zoning, if we just met the basic requirements of the zoning ordinance, we just run wild and do whatever we want as long as we meet those requirements. Most communities...
It would still be the staff review, everything.
Well, but if
When
we
you-
met the
when you
requirements
develop.
of the zoning ordinance, we would be able to build.
Right.
That's so, but we don't want to do that. We would rather go through this process. We would rather go through, the design. We'd rather go through the commitments. We'd rather tell you what we're going to do, show you the pictures of what we're going to build, and live with what's agreed to. And then then when we leave here, you know exactly what's going to be done. There's not going to be any question about it.
Mr. Kill, you mentioned that you have a wide range of floor plans as far as square footage goes, and you said there were, besides the 756 square feet aside, that there were other plans. What percentage would be that 756 aside minimum versus presumably some larger floor plans?
1,350 to 1,750 is what we would propose. So the units and the rooms would get bigger.
But the percentage?
What would your main floor square footage go up to?
I don't have that right in front of me. I didn't put the max, I just put the minimum in there because obviously as the second floor increases, the building footprint will increase. Will not encroach into a side yard because we're agreeing to that, but the unit itself would get bigger, presumably a couple 100 foot on the main floor. Again, just not having that information right in front of me. You figure if we go to 1,350 to 1,750, we've got 400 square foot, add 400 bottom, 400 is going up top. So it would presumably be 200 square foot. So it would go to 776. And in the middle of there too, somewhere, that's why we know what the smallest unit would be, and we kind of know what the largest unit would be. We expect families to come into these, they're 2 stories. Typically, empty nesters would want a ranch or something like that. We have those products, but these will be 2-story units, so they're not gonna be something that you would normally see. They'll be different. And we have the elevations, staff has the elevations. Denise, you've seen it.
So you're saying empty nesters would have a ranch to choose in this development?
They will not.
Okay,
These will be
that's what I
2-story.
thought.
No.
Okay. Our question here is whether to approve the PUD or allow staff to run it through the normal channels. And I'm not sure how many people here are familiar with PUDs. Tom asked if that's what we're here, to allow the PUD. Staff recommendation was not to go with the PUD and allow the process to go through our normal channels.
I was under the impression it was strictly a sketch plan review and comments.
That actually is accurate. We are going to go for a zone change request. I needed to make sure I came in front of the Plan Commission. The staff indicated that you had mentioned you would like to see review and comment prior to a public hearing being held. We fully intend, just so everybody's clear on this, we fully intend to petition this community for M1 PUD and come in front of the Plan Commission for a public hearing. We're not, I guess, I just don't want any, like, any misrepresentation, confusion. We fully anticipate doing that. We are simply here as part of the process to do that. And get your feedback, so I know how to maybe amend some things when we do come in front of you for a public hearing.
AJ, would it be okay if I read your staff recommendation?
Yeah, sure. It's public record.
Would you like to
No, go ahead.
Here's the staff recommendation. There are 2 attachments regarding the development provided date 6/28/22 and 9/30/22. They speak of a rezone. It seems the development would be better served going through the primary and secondary plat approval process versus a planned development, as it does not appear to meet the criteria of a planned development as mentioned in Article 7 of the zoning ordinance.
Such as?
That will refer to Mr. Monroe.
Well, I didn't have the memo, but I would question that, and.
We'd like explanation on it, too.
I mean, we're gonna have to go through primary and secondary no matter what we do.
So Article 7 of Plan Developments talks about district intent, permitted uses, and miscellaneous standards. And within the district intent section, there are 3 tests provided to the developer or ultimately to the Plan Commission when considering a plan development overlay. And the question I think that we may differ on is the second bullet. We can go through them and read them since we're here. The request for a plan development should be for one or more of the following: unique and creative designs, such as those that have special architectural character and other features that are complementary to the city of Portage, which cannot, through standard zoning, be achieved. Unusual existing physical conditions, including severe topography, sensitive drainage patterns, traffic circumstances, or environmental features that are unique to the subject property and that could not be accommodated through the standard zoning district. And 3, mixed uses that include different types of land uses arranged in a way that could not be accomplished through the use of the standard zoning districts. Mixed-use developments should share an architectural theme, landscape theme, clustering and conservation of land, and integration of natural features that are in combination and complementary to the city of Portage. It's staff's opinion that what's been submitted does not meet those tests, and it would be our recommendation to not proceed with PD overlay and to move forward through the approval process as is given to you by right by being an M1 zone property.
Understood. Well, I believe we do meet at least 2 of those, perhaps not the 3rd one. And it says should, that's not a mandatory language. I mean, I guess the point I'm making is that if we would like to ask for this zoning designation, you as a plan commission have 3 options then. You can either make an unfavorable recommendation, a favorable recommendation, or you can choose to make no recommendation to the common council. But due process allows us the ability to ask and petition the community for this. And I mean, I understand where AJ's coming from, believe me, I do. And we're not asking for a mixed use, but I've done nothing, I've heard for a better part of a year now, what about the drainage? What about the drainage? What about the drainage? Well, if that doesn't constitute a severe or a drainage pattern that everybody's concerned with, I don't know what does, because I've heard that a lot. Denise, you even brought it up tonight. So I do believe that we meet at least one or more of those criteria. That's actually why we're here. And I think we have uniqueness to the property where I believe that I can't achieve proper development without the PD designation. That is actually why I'm here. And again, part of the PD process, as AJ pointed out, is to make sure that we get input from the Plan Commission, which I know that I have heard drainage, I've heard that you'd like to know where we could be with a first floor max. So I'm actually taking down these notes, and I'm gonna try to answer these questions at the time when we have a public hearing.
And I think we're much closer than your first plan. So we're moving together. But I think with experience of people on the Planning Commission, with PUDs, I feel more comfortable leaving it with staff than us making the decision.
So,
I don't
Mr.
understand.
Kill and council is correct. If they're going through their necessary steps, the next step in the process is, once he has comments of staff, the practice here in Portage has been the Plan Commission have an opportunity to review and offer comment, is they can file an application for a PD overlay. It's completely their right. I don't think that's in dispute. We can keep spending time and we can keep offering our recommendations and, you know, we'll end up where we end up. So, I mean, that's where we are.
Denise, that's why I just didn't want there to be any confusion. We fully intend to file for a zone change. And I just didn't want anybody to be confused what our intent is, you know? I just know that we have done our level best to meet what I believe are, what the community really wants to see and how we can make this the best project, and to get the input from all of you and make sure that when I go back and I look at these things and I look at this zoning commitment, and I sit with Joe and we discuss this and my owners, that we can make sure to the best of our ability that we answer these concerns. And I get it. The first thing I'm gonna do is go back and look at all this stuff and make sure that when I come back that I have answers to these questions.
No, and I appreciate it. Like I said, we've moved in the right direction.
So just to be clear, this is the Plan Commission's opportunity, much like the earlier case that Mr. Leith had. They were here, they got a lot of comment, they came back, and they're gonna come back again. This is the Plan Commission's opportunity at the sketch to say what I like, this is what I don't like, in an attempt to get them into a place that's a little bit better. And that's truly inconsequential to whether or not ultimately the Plan Commission says yes or no on a favorable recommendation or not to the Common Council, to be able to move through this process, you know, the right way at this point. So all of those comments, like I think last time we had the Loot Road project, the comments are appreciated because it gets them more dialed in. Because even if we get to a place where they've requested and they've gone through the process, and let's just say it's approved, okay, then all these comments are of what, or to get it to what the Plan Commission likes is what's gonna make that project a good project. If it goes through this process and it doesn't get approved for a rezone, it still gives the developer the opportunity to say, this is what they got hung up on, this is what they didn't see the same way we did, so when the project comes back again, because it's gonna come back, it's closer to what everyone wants. So tonight really is that opportunity to have the full-throated discussion on what everyone likes and dislikes about this concept.
Well, it seemed like a lot of the concerns were meeting the M1 minimum standards, and being below those, I think, is what I get were one of the main concerns with the comments.
Including the lot size?
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I think that's kind of what most were commenting on. I do get with the garage, you know, the main floor square footage, that's kind of tough, but the other, I think the other sizes are a concern.
The other sizes, I'm sorry?
The 66, 80 feet, and one.
Side yards.
The side yards.
Yeah.
Well, and again, I'm gonna clarify. I don't hear side yards from them, but I hear side yards from you guys.
We're
they're talking 66 foot wide and they want 80 is what I've heard. You guys keep saying you're talking about side yards. I don't think I've heard what they prefer in side yards. And I would ask them, is it 8, is it 10, is it 5, whatever it may be, because I think we do have a disconnect on this comment.
The 66-foot wide lot is to accommodate an 8-foot side yard. We're going to build that width of building, whether the lot's 300 feet wide or whether it's 66 feet wide. Those buildings are gonna be built. We are simply trying to make that product look as best as we can and aesthetically pleasing, especially from a streetscape perspective. And with the 80-foot wide lot, now imagine, I mean, you're looking at 16-foot side yard is probably about from that wall over to Joe here, to this desk. Now imagine doubling that. So you're gonna have a building at that wall, and then you're gonna have one at that podium over there. Where's the building in the middle? From aesthetically, when you're driving down the street, it looks absolutely crazy. And it just doesn't look right to have 30 feet between buildings, especially in a project like this. You're not on a sprawling piece of countryside where you have rolling hills. And I mean, one of our drainage, quite honestly, one of the biggest drainage concerns and problems we have with this site is it's so flat. It's tough getting water to move because the property is absolutely flat. That's one of the things, quite honestly, when you talk about unique drainage problems, I've never seen a flatter piece of property. I mean, we literally have almost no fall in there. And that's too much fall is a problem, not enough causes a bigger problem. And we are flat, so, but I mean, the reason for the lot width in the side yard is the example I just gave you. It simply doesn't even look right. It's just not, and that's how those units are gonna look. And that's why we're asking for the PD designation, because we're trying to make it, at least the streetscape's gotta look nice. And we're gonna have full maintenance of these units.
See, and I don't think that maybe we have to go up to 80, but the first floor, when you drive down the street, all you see is garage. There's in a front door. That's where my concern is between the 576 and 800 square foot on that first floor. There's no, it's a garage and a door. And that's where my problem lies. You said you don't build, but you have a builder?
We have a builder in mind, yes, but
Okay.
we have not contracted with anybody, or we haven't done
So
anything.
it could change, where you could make it look more like than just a garage.
I don't have the ability to tell you that that is possible right now, Denise.
Okay,
I don't have the authority to say that. I mean, if you press me for an answer right now, I'd have to tell you, we're going to build that unit.
okay,
Whether it's 80-foot wide or 66-foot wide.
right. And I understand that part on
I mean, the only
having
thing
that
we would-
large, and that's why I'm not stuck on 80. What I'm stuck on is the plan. I'd like to see something other than just a garage.
The 16-foot side yard was what was established when they wrote the M1 zoning description.
Yes.
So that is the standard for portage. You're kind of arguing that isn't.
That's standard for M1. AJ, that's not, 15-foot side yard is not standard in every zoning classification, is it? For residential? It's just standard in M1, right? As I recall?
It's the standard in M1. In M2, it's 25. M3, it's 35.
What is it in R2 and R3? What
R2, yeah, I'm going back to. R4 is 5. R3 is 6, totaling 14 in the aggregate. R2 is 6, totaling 16 feet in the aggregate. And R1 is 10 feet and 30 feet in the aggregate.
So I guess my request boils down to the same side yards as required by R2 zoning. For
Well, no,
single,
I think
for
it's,
single-family homes.
it's the look of the home with the main floor living space.
No,
But-
Denise, I wrote your comment.
Okay.
I mean, I've got that comment written down.
Okay.
I understand that you're basically telling me the garage door you believe dominates the streetscape. This gentleman said, well, we require 15-foot side yards. That's simply not true, because in the single-family home, we're asking for the same side yard as an R2 zoning district, which is, probably dominates the community. That type of zoning typically does. So it's not like we're asking for something that is out of the ordinary. It's really not. I mean, I don't know, I mean, this is simply a duplex unit. It's not like we're asking for 15-unit townhome buildings. A single-family home, we would have these same side yards we're requesting. So as far as the side yard goes, you know, that's why I said, we pick this side yard with the 8 foot because this is what the community seems to be comfortable with. And this seems to be what, you know, would be acceptable, is what we had thought. And that's the reason, that's why we went with this. I mean, and again, you're the same as R2, which dominates the community zoning as far as housing-wise.
So why don't
I would argue.
you rezone it as R2?
We're zoned M1. We have that zoning right now. We're not asking for M1 zoning, we're asking for a PD designation on the M1. So,
You want to meet those standards of R2, why don't you
Yeah, but I-
rezone to R2?
I live, the property's next to a trailer park, and it's, backs up to commercial property on Route 6 that, quite honestly, has more junk in the back of those properties than I've ever seen. So nobody's gonna wanna build, you heard earlier from Mr. Leith, you talk about tough piece of property. I have a trailer park on one side, and we have commercial zoning with garbage on our property line on the north. We are, in my opinion, the most logical transitional zoning. I see why the community did this. It makes perfect sense why we're zoned what we are, given what we have around us and the zoning classifications around us. It makes perfect sense. I never questioned that one time. I'm like, yeah, I can see why they would have zoned this M1. It makes perfect sense. We're not gonna ask for R2 when we simply can't, there's nothing, we won't be able to sell it. And again, that goes back to my basic argument, or not argument, that goes back to our basically request of this PUD and why I've been basically pitching it to you all like I have. Because we have some serious, there's detention at 130 foot along the west property line for a reason. Okay? That's there because we have legitimate existing problems, if you will, around us that we have to try to overcome somehow with this. And these giant buffers and the placement of detention, where we actually have them shown, there's a lot of thought that went into that, giving what we have to deal with as our neighbors, you know? And I'm not saying they're terrible, but it is what it is. It is existing, and we simply have to work with what we have, you know, as our adjacent properties.
Our major concern is just the main floor square footage and some living space showing, and not just garage doors. I think that's the major.
So let's talk about the first floor for a sec. Would you like us, I would certainly like to, I think we're gonna have to keep a smaller unit first floor in there somewhere. Not everybody's gonna want the same size building. Are you asking that we commit to a certain percentage of those type of size units? And then that will require that the first floor is larger. I mean,
Mr. Coe, when I was asking that question before, I just wanted to know if you had any idea what percentage would be those, minimum square footage, duplexes, and, if you don't necessarily have a builder picked out, you might have one in mind, but if you haven't, contracted at this point in time, that whole discussion might be a moot point. It just seems to me and I understand you've got some issues with this property. I definitely understand that. You are absolutely right, and I can appreciate your position. You talked about aesthetic sense previously. If you were to cut down on the number of actual lots from 152, maybe 10 or 20%, would it still make economic sense for you, this project?
it wouldn't even, we could develop with straight M1 zoning and not have cut down that much. It doesn't make any sense. It's just, that's why that's another, it simply makes no sense. That's another reason we are where we are, because, this is a tough one. This is a toughie.
Yeah, and just my last comment on that, you just recently mentioned, that people here in Portage seem to be comfortable with this. I'm sorry, sir, but I'm just not comfortable with this layout for Portage.
No, I meant side yards, 8 foot. I meant in general. An 8 foot seemed to be a nice side yard size for a lot of development. And it's your R2 standard, so it's reasonable for me to assume that, because if that's what your R2 standard is for a single family home, I have no reason to believe the community's not comfortable with it. And that's kind of how you gauge those things. And I was simply referring to the side yards, the size, yes.
It just seems really crowded, that's all.
I have written down, just to recap, if you would allow me, please. I have a question mark drainage to the north, question mark. I'm not exactly sure how I'm supposed to address that right now.
I didn't know that was 130 foot.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So-
Oh, to the north is way in excess of that. There's a giant, the outlet C is huge. Well, if you look at the lot sizes, lot depth, compare it to the drainage way.
Right.
Yeah, we're right there. And again, this isn't exact, we're not using.
Right.
It's not
And I
scaled
appreciate that,
out,
because
but
that's a
yeah.
major concern.
Yeah, and so, yeah, when you look at that, I wrote down first floor max, meaning, you would like to see maybe us to commit to a percentage of the smaller floor plans? Is kind of what I thought, is that correct, or am I on the wrong track, or?
I'd like to see something other than garage.
I'm getting to that one.
Right.
I have that one written down separately. I know this gentleman said meet more minimum M1 standards.
All right, hold on.
I mean,
Wait, again, for clarification, Denise, you want smaller first floor footprint for living
Larger.
space, or larger?
Larger first floor
Okay.
footprint.
Because he said the opposite when he was going through his list. So they're looking to enlarge that, not,
first floor max is what I have, and then a percentage, us to commit to a percentage of the smaller first floor, meaning that it wouldn't dominate the project, is the way I
is that
took
what you're
it.
saying?
That's what he's saying.
Okay.
Okay, I want to make sure, that's why I asked.
That's
if
not
you
what
let me
I'm
recap.
saying. I think it was a suggestion.
If I'm gonna try to dive in, I think there's two different things. I think Denise's comment is, she thinks 576, if that was the dominant size of the first floor footprint, is too small, correct?
It's the minimum
Okay?
size.
And this, again, too small, all right, on the minimum. And separately, she feels that the front is dominated by the garage door.
Garage dominates front of building, streetscape. I did
Correct.
write that. I have that one. I know I got that
Yes.
one right.
And
So-
take care of that, either you have to have a smaller garage or a larger first floor.
In a larger lot.
Well, I don't know about. What, is that something that the Plan Commission, a smaller garage? I mean. it's
No,
a
I would
two-
like to see,
It's a two-car garage is what it is.
I know, and everybody wants one for their car and one for their junk.
Well, when you move into a unit like this, you're not, hopefully you don't have any junk, because, number one, you're not gonna be allowed to. You're not gonna be allowed to have anything outside. You're not gonna be allowed to put anything in your rear yard. The HOAs that we run, they will take you to court, and they will win. We have a very, very, very solid, decades-long track record on this. So, there's not gonna be junk laying around. They're not gonna be allowed to park a boat in their side yard. None of that's gonna be allowed. It's going to have to be taken care of and maintained. And that's part of having a management company, along with every other component that makes an HOA run properly. So, that's not gonna happen. So,
But to get your question answered, does the Plan Commission have a feeling on the garage being a one-car garage?
I don't like it. I mean, you have bikes,
I'm just, but on the street, not on the everyone's junk question, but on the streetscape question.
Well, Denise,
It
we
was,
could
hold
always-
on, is the garage door dominating, is it a possible solution to take it down to a one car? If it's not, it's not, but that's.
right. I don't think it's the best solution,
I guess
but I think we just need to have a different look than two garages right next to each other.
Would the Plan Commission be amenable to perhaps a one-car garage door option and a two? Give people a choice? The garage can always be made deeper to store all the junk, as you would put it. I'm just kind of throwing things out. I don't know even if we would do that. I'm just trying to get a feel for where
So
the
you're
Plan Commission members are
proposing
going.
that 151 duplexes all look like that?
152.
Yes, that is correct.
152. You don't have any other ideas or thoughts or, I mean, the PUD definitely says some creative designs that have special architectural character. Do you have anything that could meet that challenge there?
We do not know, but that's why I asked about a varying product. I hadn't, honestly, a single car garage, I hadn't even considered that, but
I'm not asking for a single car garage.
I'm thinking of ways that we can keep the basic width of the product and make the buildings
Well,
look.
can't you increase
a
the
variety-
width?
Maybe switch the buildings up a little.
Can't you increase the width to give you a little bit more space to put in that front room or give her that space that she's looking for?
Well,
Decrease
In
the amount
order-
of lots.
in order to do that, I'm going to have to decrease the side yards from 8 foot to 7. Well, we're kind of set on 66 is where we're going to need to be, because that's about as best I suppose we could lose the park. We could lose all the green space. I mean, we could try to lose all that, but why? It's not, at the end of the day, you're going to look and we're going to have nothing there for the kids.
AJ, do you have the other plans, the other renderings?
I believe Dina's passed out the information that Mr. Kill shared with us.
I only have the one. The different models.
No, that's it.
Oh,
Oh, no,
no, I
that-
thought you said you gave all the
Well,
model
then it's-
renderings to
it's that
staff.
It's that elevation, but just bigger footprint.
Okay. So Scott, what do we need to do tonight?
You're done with comments, we're done with the meeting.
Okay,
For this petition.
With this petition, excuse me, we do have one more item.
We do.
So,
they've been patiently waiting.
That somebody's been waiting for.
Let us know if you can come up with anything.
I do, like I said, the clarification Scott offered, appreciated. I do have the notes. I will take this back. Like I said, the plan I know that I can commit to is what I have here in front of me tonight. I can fully commit to that. As far as changing some of these things, I simply don't have the authority to do that right now. I can't commit to that, but I did hear what the Plan Commission's thinking. So, thank you. I do appreciate that.
And you've came way far on the drainage, so that looks good.
We're trying. It's tough. It's a tough site. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bigger doesn't make it work. This is gonna be big. Like, I'm tired.
Good luck.
They say, like, when people get to be our age,
Could you call our next order of business?
yes, this is new business public hearing. Z0722 Portage Properties LLC, care of Scott Yanni of Yanni Law, 3 Lincoln Way, Suite 201, Valparaiso, Indiana, requesting a change of zoning from NC Neighborhood Commercial to R4 Single Family Residential for 5160 Central Avenue.
Thank you for your patience in waiting.
I wanted to thank you all for your patience in waiting, but also to the folks out here, because I have a feeling that this will be of importance to them, and I'm hoping they're going to all like what they have to hear this evening. My name is Scott Yanni. Yanni works. And I am here on behalf of Portage Properties LLC, which is the owner of 5160 Central Avenue. And I have with me Colin Martin. And Colin is a professional engineer, but more importantly, he's the type of engineer that I think the folks in this room will want to hear from this evening. He has the designation CHMM, I had to look it up, Certified Hazardous Materials Manager. Did I get that right? Mm-hmm. So Colin is a principal. He's a vice president of the company that is associated with the development of this property, but more importantly and more to the point, to the environmental remediation of this property. The property, some of you may know, it's Central Avenue to the west. It is, we depicted it in the comprehensive plan, but in the West Side District. And the property had for many, many years, until 2015, been the site of Dresswell Dry Cleaning. And everybody nods, and unfortunately, we've all come to learn what dry cleaning businesses can lead to, and this was such a case. So we are here before you. We have statutory criteria that we must meet. We have your zoning ordinance criteria that we must meet. And so those are important elements. Customarily, I do a lot of this type of work, like Todd Leith does. And usually, when I appear before plan commissions, I'm asking if a zoning change, it's often say, hey, we have this residential property, can we change it to a commercial use authorization, or we have light industrial and we want a higher industrial designation that will permit more uses. In this case, we're doing the opposite. we are currently, or this property rather, is currently neighborhood commercial, and it permitted the type of business that was there. But we're asking you tonight for an R4 single-family residential district designation for this property. And that is consistent, this property, if we look in our immediate area, is on an island. We're surrounded by single-family homes. On either side, behind us, across the street, and the folks that I sent the notices to are single-family home, or have single-family homes. Now, we are, as the West Side District contemplates in the comprehensive plan, because that's where we have to start this entire analysis, is do you fit in the comprehensive plan? And in this particular area, it favors single-family home residents, but on the Central Avenue corridor, it has an allowance for up to 10%, kind of ideally up to 10% commercial uses that will be permitted. So when this property was consistent with that use, but we are seeking not to depart from what the comprehensive plan contemplates for this area of the city, but rather to go to the single-family home designation. So we think that we are in line with what the comprehensive plan has in consideration for this property. So then we look to, okay, the current conditions and character of the structures in the immediate vicinity, but particularly throughout the district. And as I described, we're kind of on an island. We are consistent with our surrounding uses, and the district would be primarily single-family residential uses, and that's what we are asking for this evening. And then the question is, the next is, well, what is the most desirable use for this property? We think that for unique, or reasons unique to this property, is that the residential use is the most desirable use. And a large part of that is, and I know probably some folks are going to have some direct questions for Colin, and that's why he's here this evening. This property is being monitored and overseen by IDEM in the cleanup. There has, since 2019, there has been significant testing of the property and the plumes that were left behind by this dry cleaning business. And Colin can speak to those for you, or speak to you about those. But there are monitoring wells in place throughout the property to see exactly where is the extent of this plume and ultimately how it needs to be remediated so that we'll know that someday it's actually cleaned up. But so IDEM can give us the next applicable set of standards. We're kind of coming to you a little quick tonight because we're coming to you before this is cleaned up. But now I need to kind of let you know why that is. When IDEM sets the standards for cleaning up property, one of the important things they look to is the underlying zoning. And as you might predict, if the zoning is residential, it requires cleanup to a higher standard than it would if it's a commercial use. And the reason is that people who live in homes and come in contact with their properties, they're more likely to do so on a more significant level than somebody visiting a business, coming to the parking lot, and dropping off, their clothes. So IDEM, for residential use, if you all in the council decides that, oh yeah, this should be designated for single-family home usage, IDEM is going to give a higher level of cleanup. Now, IDEM can only give the level or set the standards based on what the applicable zoning is. A lot of times you'd kind of have this coming the other way. And I have had dry cleaning businesses where we've done exactly that because it was zoned, because it wasn't an area like this where we had the 10% kind of contemplated. It just designated the entire block as residential, and they didn't maybe when they adopted the new zoning map, they didn't pick out the parcels, right? And so then I have to go in and say, well, this is designated, or this is residential, there's dry cleaning businesses here, but the only thing we could fit on here is commercial, and that has to do with the development. Ultimately, we think that this district is better served, and ultimately the value, and to more likely not have this remain an eyesore, a vacant lot, and a true attractive nuisance, and all the sorts of things that happens when you have a vacant building, is to ultimately permit residential use and eventually a home on that site. Now, Colin is going to probably, in response to, I imagine the folks here are going to have questions, hey, when is this going to be cleaned up? Because that's fundamentally what people care about, right? Our first step is to get IDEM to set and deliver a cleanup plan that they will oversee, and we're hopeful that that will be at the residential cleanup level. And so we're asking to rezone the property on that basis. And then thereafter, there is a cleanup process. I'd start to describe it. I heard it at the DRC meeting, and I've seen it at other properties, but Colin's going to be much better at describing that. But that cleanup process will take place. It doesn't take that long a period of time to complete that, but thereafter then there's testing done before anything could actually be done on this ground. And that's going to take a couple of years at least before. But we need to try to approach zoning before that couple of years' time. So I think I spoke to item number 2 and 3 on the statutory list. Conservations of values throughout the jurisdiction, I kind of touched on that. We think that we have a much better chance having a single-family home eventually, or at least having this property available for a single-family home than having having this one little area designated commercial. And yes, there will be a cleanup process regardless of, that will go forward regardless. But then this property will be commercial, and then it'll be not cleaned to the same level. And then you can try to accommodate a commercial usage. We just think, and Colin and his group thinks that this would be better suited for residential use. Responsible development and growth. We're hoping that this enhanced cleanup, that the fact that we will likely not have, commercial, or we wouldn't have commercial traffic with multiple vehicles coming nearby, what I presume, I didn't have a chance to speak to these folks because we were in the same room all together, wasn't appropriate, but I'm guessing they're neighbors. And I'm hoping that they would like to hear that, one, this property is going to be cleaned to a higher standard, and 2, that there is not going to be a commercial use of this property and all the cars and anything else that might go there. Before it was a dry cleaners, but it's opened a number of potential uses. So in sum, that is why we are here this evening, and we're hoping that that you folks will agree and commend change to the council. But certainly we welcome your questions. I think that I've adjusted kind of the legal zoning framework, but I'm guessing maybe you, and probably even some of these folks, may have some questions that Colin is better able to answer.
So would you like questions for Colin before we?
I think maybe that might be easier rather than I could.
Okay. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the public hearing, and if you'll make notes so that we can make sure anybody from the public has their questions answered, and then we'll open it up to the commission.
And shall I, and I'm sorry, shall I step aside to let folks come here?
They'll go to the podium.
Okay, thank you.
I now open the public hearing. Is there anybody here to speak for the petitioner? Is there anybody here to speak for the petitioner? Is there anybody here to speak for the petitioner? Is there anybody here to speak against the petitioner?
I am Reverend Michael Cooper, 5455 Clem Road here in Portage. I'm before this commission to ask if this is the path that you want to take on this very problematic and highly contaminated property. There are two approaches, one that is proposed this evening to rezone and then clean it up, which given the statements in the petition's application is in the best financial interest of Portage Property LLC. Or should it be cleaned up before this commission begins to consider what is in the best interest of the city? On several occasions this past week, this being the most recent, I have talked with residents living directly above the plume of cancer-causing waste. Our fellow residents have had to deal with long-term effects of the criminal act of dumping of chemicals out of the back door of the cleaners by the previous owners. Regrettably, probably some that were used to clean the items that I would drop off at the cleaners. Now along Central Avenue and Blake Street, our residents have permanent vapor remediation systems installed in their basements, monitoring wells installed on their properties. They wonder if it's safe for their children to live in their own homes or for their grandchildren to visit on holidays. They question, is it safe for their pets to run around their yards or if they can eat the vegetables they grow in their own backyards? While this may seem a simple zoning change that this commission deals with on a regular basis, what has preceded this moment has been a horror for several of our city's residents. Eventually, after remediation and closeout by IDEM, this site will return to some sort of use, whether commercial, residential, or vacant. This decision as such, however, is not one that needs to be made this evening. Madam Chairperson, I have some additional items to present to the commission that would require some additional time. They are public documents from IDEM. I believe these documents are important for your consideration this evening. So with your consent, Madam Chairperson, I would like to submit these documents to the commission and request additional time to read a paragraph from one document and 3 emails from another document that provides comments from the IDEM attorney about the application being considered this evening for the public record. These documents are available on the IDEM website. They are public record. I have lots of copies. The large document I'm not going to reference, I'm not going to read, but it is one of the documents that is available on the virtual file cabinet with the IDEM. The first document that I would like to refer to is the notice of liability that was dated June 27th, 2022 by the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. This is a letter from Ryan Groves, Chief State of Cleanup Section, Office of Land Quality. I'm going to be referring to page 3 of this document and reading the paragraph that is started once, this first full paragraph there. Once Portage Property LLC took the title to the property, however, all work on site ceased. PPL refused access to the participating PRP potential responsible parties, which terminated all response actions on the source property. The participating PRP continued its investigation of the nature and extent of the off-site contamination, investigated to determine whether there was any unacceptable risk to off-site receptors, and continued its attempts without success to negotiate access with PPL. Once IDM deemed the contaminated plume delimited, the agency requested the participating PRP submit a remedial work plan. That remedial work plan, which includes their proposal for remediation to the property to commercial standards, was submitted on February 8, 2022. IDM approved the remedial work plan on March 30th, 2022. So IDM has approved a remediation plan for this site almost 10, 11 months ago. PPL has continued to deny the participating PRP access to its property, which has delayed responsive action concerning on-site contamination at the source for over 3 years. This is the notice of liability. This was an action taken by our state IDM department. The second item is a series of 3 emails that were available through the virtual file cabinet as well. This first email, we're reading them in reverse order, is from Stephen Thrill, the section chief of the Office of Legal Counsel, in which several attorneys, including Mr. Martin here, were copied on. I would read this for you. I'm just going to read the first 2 pages. I'm not going to read the entire thing. Thank you for the update, Tabitha. To be clear, IDM does not agree that Portage's, that's Portage Properties, when Portage is read here, it's Portage Properties, that Portage's pending zoning petition justifies further delay in cleaning up this property and returning it to a condition where it can be put to productive use. As detailed in my prior email, Portage has multiple options that which would allow appropriate responsive action to proceed without waiting for a rezoning decision. Namely, Portage could allow the participating PRPs on its property to commence a cleanup to commercial standards in accordance with current zoning and expected future use. As we all know, this would not preclude further remediation to residential standards in the future. Apparently, Portage itself could agree to and commence a cleanup to residential standards. Your reply fails to respond to the first option and mischaracterizes the second. As I am plain in my previous email, IDM is happy to review plans for cleanup the property to residential standards prior to potential rezoning. If Portage will simply commit to implementing these plans if approved, by refusing to so commit, Portage, not IDM, proposes, quote, to wait until the rezoning occurs before the agency reviews these plans. IDM understands Portage to be eschewing both aforementioned options in hopes of eventually achieving Portage's preferred outcome, a residential cleanup at the expense of the participating PRPs. This course of action is at the expense of a timely cleanup and fails to comply with Portage's obligations under CER, CLA, and IC 1325-4. There is no justification in either statutory scheme for delaying response actions pending a determination as to which RPs are liable for the cost difference between commercial and residential cleanups. IDM has no objection to Portage's zoning petition, but the agency absolutely does not object to Portage's apparent plan to continue implementing cleanup until after decision is made on that petition. Please let me know if Portage wishes to reconsider. Tabitha Balazar sent the earlier email and her statement, and she is from Lewis Kemps, which I believe is a law firm. Hi, Stephen. To provide an update, last night, Portage Properties met with Portage Development Review Committee regarding its zoning petition. The petition is scheduled for a final hearing with the zoning board during the first week of December. The petition is scheduled for a final, we anticipate we anticipate that the property will be rezoned at that time. Pursuant to your email below, we understand that IDM's position is that the agency does not wish to review plans for cleaning up the property to residential standards prior to the rezoning of the property, which is anticipated to occur in less than a month. Portage Properties does not object to IDM's proposal to wait until the rezoning occurs before the agency reviews the plans. The people of Portage, Madam Chairperson, I believe deserves to hear the advice provided to the commission by the Development Review Committee, who, given this evidence, met with the petitioner, even though this is neither a development nor a matter in which they could provide a thorough technical review, in my opinion. It gave the petitioner the impression that this approval was a done deal. I request, Madam Chairperson, that the report be read into the public record and a list of participants in that meeting be made public as well. The last email is from Stephen Thrill, the attorney for IDM. And I believe, good afternoon. 3.1331 of the Portage Municipal Code of the City of Portage, it appears that the only permitted residential use is dwelling single-family upper stories. As the property lacks a structure with upper stories, this permitted use does not apply. At any rate, the petition from Portage Properties, LLC states, quote, number one, if petitioner's petition to rezone is granted, petitioner will eventually seek to develop the property for a residential use authorized as an R4 single-family residential district. Letter 4, which will be the application that we have before us today, of 10. Number 2, if the neighborhood commercial district usage classification were to remain on the property would likely remain vacant. Letter on page 8. Until, and number 3, quote, until and unless petitioner's petition is granted, petitioner cannot begin to explore specific opportunities for residential development. Per Portage's own statement, continuing in the email, the expected future use of the subject property will remain commercial until and unless, in quotes, the rezoning petition is granted. Please keep IDM posted on development regarding the position. In the meantime, please note Portage is free to remediate its property beyond the commercial cleanup that IC 1325-5 currently requires. However, to the extent possible, IDM intends to avoid the problem of reviewing remediation plans, quote, theoretically, not pragmatically, to use Mr. Martin's ironic phrasing from our recent meeting. Thus, if Portage wants IDM to review plans for cleanup of the property to residential standards absent of a rezoning, Portage will need to commit to actually implementing any approved residential plans by way of an agreed order with IDM, which should be enforceable in court. Portage would not need to commit to implementation without delay, irrespective of whether the residential remediation would be funded or reimbursed by any other party. Portage would be free to pursue outside funding without IDM's involvement. And I will leave the rest of the letter for you to read. Madam Chairperson, this correspondence about the delays on site cleanup is very troubling. The one thing that is clear is that Portage Property and its representatives are not concerned about the residents in this historic area on our west side, only concerned about maximizing the amount of money they can get out of this remediation. It is also clear that there is nothing that this commission can do this evening except move this forward, so these plotters don't have any more excuses to do what they should have started 3 years ago, or what they even had approval to do almost a year ago. If I may, Madam Chairperson, since this is the only opportunity that the residents of Portage get to address Portage Properties representatives, my only question is, when this remediation is completed, how much money is going to be left to clean up the rest of the contamination that our residents along Central Avenue and Blake Road have been living through as a living hell, and will have to deal with the contamination long after Portage Properties has completed this remediation. Thank you.
Is there anybody here to speak against the petitioner?
I own the property at 5158 Central, which is directly west of the dry cleaners. 5160 is certainly a ground zero of a huge contamination problem.
And your name?
Timothy Hill.
Okay, and make sure you write it down with your address, sorry.
Sure. The previous owners of the dry cleaners took their dry cleaning agents behind the building and dumped them on the ground for over 40 years. It affected my property severely. It affected my neighbor's properties as well. In all, 16 properties north of me have been affected. For the last 6 years, IDEM, Wilcox Environmental Engineers, and the insurance company responsible for the cleanup of the properties has worked on a plan to remediate the problem. Wilcox drilled several monitoring wells, as the Reverend said, dozens of soil borings to delineate the severity and the location of the plume. Wilcox worked to install air mitigation systems, supply city water to people who had well water previously, and they kept the affected owners updated on the process. After purchasing 5160 a couple of years ago, Portage Properties denied Wilcox Environmental access to the property. Enviroforensics has strong ties to the Portage Properties. Enviroforensics is a mediation company with a strange relationship to Portage Properties. It seems that the CEO of EFI was a signatory on the petition made by Portage Properties. He owns both places. He was involved in both businesses. EFI submitted a proposal to IDEM to remediate 5160. It was not approved. The price EFI submitted for 5160 was more money than Wilcox was granted to clean up the other 15 properties combined. It's a money grab for these guys. That's all it is. It's not working, and it's stalling the process of work on my property, my other neighbor's property. Work has begun on 13 properties already. The idea that they're going to have to take 2 years to come up with a plan, there's already a plan. Wilcox submitted this plan to IDEM a year ago and got approved. They don't have to drill any more holes, do any more tests, do any more sampling. There's a plan in place to remediate. I believe these two couples back here, you've had the injections made. Pipes are in place. 13 properties have been started. They put the pipes in the ground, they inject it with something, it eats up the perchloroethylene, and it goes away. In 5 or 10 years, it goes away. Not in a year or two, in 5 or 10 years. 13 properties have been started. My property, 5160 and 5172, have not been started because IDEM wants all 3 properties done at the same time. Dresswell property is ground zero. Everything emanates from there. If Wilcox treated my property and it rained, the next day more pollution would just run off of the dry cleaner's property onto mine. It doesn't make any sense to do my property or 5172. IDEM wants all 3 done at the same time. And that can't happen because these greedy people stopped it. It could be a lot of years before Portage Property and or EFI get permission from IDEM to remediate their own properties. It could take years. In the meantime, I'm not getting fixed. 5172 is not getting fixed. We're in limbo. It could really take years. I ask you to deny the petition. Do you have paper to write on? You took it.
Is there anybody here to speak against the petitioner? Is there anybody here to speak against the petitioner? If not, I close the public hearing. I'm sorry.
I'm Linda Uporski. I live at 2590 Blake Road. When somebody came to my door, they said, "We want to take a sample of your water because we have well water." Well, when they found it out, it was so bad. They took us out of our home for 2 weeks. Lived in a hotel for 2 weeks. Could come home during the day. If you use the toilet, push the lid down and then flush it. It was that bad. Couldn't do dishes. So, and I raised 2 boys. I've lived there almost 50 years. And I raised 2 boys on that water. So, and my one son lives across the street, and his air in his house is so bad. He's got some kind of a unit that sucks the air out. They put ports in our cement in the basement and put air machines to check it. That's how bad it is. So please, don't give them their right to do that. No, they don't deserve it.
Is there anybody here to speak against the petitioner? If not, I close the public hearing. Before we open for comments from the commission, I'll allow you to address all of their questions.
Thank you very much. First, I understand the emotion that's coming out and the frustration and probably the feeling of betrayal and, how this was visited upon these folks. I want to be clear that Colin is not associated with the dry cleaning business. And his folks purchased this property, and he's going to explain this a little bit more. The plan that was in place or proposed, I don't think is what these folks would ultimately like living in a residential neighborhood. Because it's not the standard of cleanup that Colin is here to propose this evening. And I do understand the first gentleman's frustration. Well, these folks can pay for it. It's a frustration, but it's a reality of the world that these cleanups are in the millions of dollars. And there won't be anybody that does anything with this property. That cleanup to the enhanced level just won't occur unless somebody takes a risk, spends, it's not a money grab. We're not being greedy, and I know I'm not going to convince anybody in the room likely of this. They've taken a risk by saying, hey, here's a property that really should be residential. There's somebody that wants to do the quick and easy cleanup, and they're ready to do it right now. But these folks come in and they say, look, this is not what should happen with this property. We want to do the harder thing, and yes, we want to hold accountable those who are accountable. And the folks who are accountable, quite frankly, that ran these dry cleaners, they're not around anymore. Are there likely insurance policies out there that cover those folks? It's quite possible. Will those insurance companies who have the ability to pay millions of dollars and are beholden and obligated to pay for the cleanup that IDEM requires, will they be required to do that? Yes. if the zoning changes. If it does not, the answer is no. And it's as simple as that. These folks, we can say they're greedy, but what they've come into is kind of, they probably don't look like white knights, and I'm not saying they are altogether, right? Because they've identified there is an opportunity here to give something better than is being kind of forced down these folks' throat without them having a say. Now, Colin knows, and, I've heard the cleanup, and it was described. That's exactly what's going to occur on this property, but I'd like you to hear from him because he knows much better, and I'm hoping that some of his direct words will help here. So, Colin, you heard the comments.
Sure. First of all, thank you to the board and for everyone for coming out tonight and sharing your emotions and thought. I know this site, the former dry cleaning activities and the release of those chemicals and how far they've traveled, how many lives they've affected is just tragic. And it's something I've seen quite a bit in my field, which is environmental remediation. I think we need to make a distinction first and foremost that Portage Properties LLC is the current site owner, but never owned the site during the portion of the time when it was a dry cleaner. It was after it went out of business, Portage Property bought the property, so they in no way contributed to the release of any of these chemicals. I just want to make sure that that is very clearly understood by everyone, that Portage Properties LLC is not a contributor in any way to any of the chemicals in the ground. The second thing I would like to say is that Portage Properties LLC, when they bought the property, began immediately doing environmental investigation work at the property. They installed monitoring wells of the property. They advanced soil borings of the property. They were in communication with the Dresswell Cleaners and Wilcox and their insurance and their lawyers. We provided all that data to them. Wilcox included that data in their remediation work plan. We've been going about this process very much next to each other. What we think, and here's the biggest difference from what the insurance companies funding the work for Dresswell Cleaners and Wilcox and IDEM, we think that a cleanup to remediation, a remediation to residential cleanup standards is what's best for this community, what's best for this property, what's best for everyone. That is the remediation plan that EnviroForensics wrote up and proposed to IDEM about a year ago, last December. IDEM rejected it because the current zoning is commercial, it's not residential. IDEM can't force a cleanup to residential standards if the intended future use is not going to be residential. And IDEM evaluated that by looking at the zoning of the property. So when Wilcox submitted their RWP and said, we're going to clean this up to a commercial standard, IDEM then approved that plan and said yes, because the property is zoned for commercial usage. And that's sort of the back and forth and the snippet of the email from Stephen Thiel, counsel for IDEM, where he said, look, you said it yourself, this property is zoned commercial, that's what our remediation goals are currently geared towards. If it changes to residential, let us know. So that's why we come before you now. It's not in any way to minimize the cleanup, but on the other hand, because we want the best and highest cleanup possible for this community, for this property, for these neighbors. We don't want this contamination hanging around under the guise of a commercial standard when we all know it would be extremely difficult to redevelop this property as a commercial property in this location with that contamination still in place. So I just want everyone to be aware that's where we're coming from. We're not responsible for this. We're trying to ensure it gets cleaned up to the greatest extent possible.
Colin, if the petition is denied, right, it will remain as a commercially zoned piece of property,
Right.
correct? And it will be cleaned to commercial standards,
Correct.
Which are not as robust as residential standards, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that will be the criteria IDEM uses to judge the cleanup will be the commercial
And
standards.
Portage Properties, irrespective, owns the property, correct? And there is no liability whatsoever. Portage Properties, when it bought this property, couldn't come in and buy liability for millions of dollars, correct?
When Portage Properties bought the property, they bought it under a CERCLA bona fide prospective purchaser requirement, which says you do due diligence, you identify any of the environmental risks associated with the site, and then when you purchase that site, you have ensured that it was there before you bought it. So CERCLA, US EPA, says, we understand you didn't cause this contamination, you're not liable for the contamination.
But it creates an incentive to somebody coming in like Portage Properties to say, hey, we will oversee this cleanup and we'll be responsible for implementation. We'll come before zoning boards. We'll go before item. We'll incur all those costs in the hope that ultimately there's a successful redevelopment of this project rather than it just being left there. And who knows, quite frankly, if Wilcox would have ever visited this property, if IDEM would have gotten involved, but for this type of identification process and somebody requiring at the early stages even Wilcox to be there and finding insurance policies. Because the real tragedy is that a lot of these contaminated sites don't get cleaned up. Why? Because there's no financial responsibility. So kind of like the name Enviroforensics suggests, one of the things they do is a forensic search. And those forensic searches can take many years because I'm gonna maybe not surprise folks that insurance companies don't just come stand up for whoever the Dresswell business was, and they don't come and say, hey, I hear you have an environmental problem, we're here to clean it up. It takes somebody who's willing to take kind of an entrepreneurial risk, do a lot of front-end work to do this type of thing. And ultimately, I kind of sense the mood of the room that looking with a wary eye, and believe me, I get it. I read Mr. Hill's comments because I dug out the newspaper article from 2020, I think it was 2020 or maybe 2019, and I can't imagine, and I'm certainly understanding.
I think I can speak to that a little bit as well. And the emails that you've been provided from IDEM and from legal counsel for Portage Properties have been very contentious because of this exact issue. We are demanding and insistent upon a better cleanup for this property in this neighborhood. And IDEM has been saying, well, we can't demand that of the responsible party, of the Dresswell cleaners right now. And that's sort of the back and forth we've been having with our legal counsel saying, well, you can, and IDEM saying, but we can't. We had a meeting with IDEM, and the resolution was, as spelled out in that email, because you're not zoned residential, we can't demand a residential. We can't use these residential cleanup levels in our evaluation of the remediation plan put forward by the RP. Now, that remediation plan proposed to do a limited amount of cleanup on site and leave a lot of contamination in place. So to Mr. Hill's comment, yes, they did propose to clean up some of the contamination, but a lot of it was going to be left in place and would continue to trickle onto his property in perpetuity. If the property is not cleaned up fully to residential standards, that contamination left there will continue to migrate off-site. The plan proposed by Enviroforensics on behalf of the property owner proposed to clean the site up to drinking water standards. It was getting it clean enough where you could drink the water. That was the plan, and IDEM did not approve that plan. IDEM approved a plan leaving a lot more contamination in place. That was proposed by Wilcox, being funded by the insurance company. So,
And by the way,
to that end, yeah, go ahead.
Enviroforensics cleanup is much more expensive, correct?
Oh, yeah, because you're cleaning up to a much lower level, getting more contamination removed, so it costs more money.
I mean, in terms of supplies, in terms of, I mean, I know it was called a money grab, but it's to effect a higher level of cleanup, correct?
Yeah, there's no money grab to it. It's getting a plan in front of IDEM. There's no cost associated with that plan. It was a technical document complying with IDEM's requirements saying this is what we would propose to meet a residential remedial standard.
And Mr. Hill also said, well, my concern, and I certainly don't want to mischaracterize, but my concern is that it's gonna be years before you get this plan approved, and when is this ever gonna happen? It's gonna be decades.
I think what he was saying is some of the off-site remediation work has already been completed by Wilcox, and we have no control over that. Portage Properties LLC is talking with IDEM about cleanup of the on-site contamination on their property, the property Portage Properties LLC owns only. Wilcox can implement any time a cleanup off-site at any property they want. We have no control over that. They're feel free to, IDEM has approved their work plan to do that work. They can move forward and do that whenever. It's just not cost efficient for them to do it without doing the site or having to come back and do the site separately. So they could do it, they just don't want to because it's not cost effective for them.
When can, if the zoning is changed, when can you submit the remediation plan to residential standards?
Well, we're currently working with IDEM and Wilcox right now to get things going from an on-site remediation standpoint so that the 5158, like all the surrounding properties, Wilcox can save money and start doing all that work. But we're going to work with IDEM and Wilcox, and we have another email into them, and we're going to keep updating them as this process continues to ensure that additional remediation requirements are put into place, those lower standards are utilized, and that the site is thoroughly cleaned up so that this long-tail contamination isn't there in perpetuity.
And as soon as, if the zoning designation is changed, will you be moving promptly, or do you wait years to submit this?
No, so as soon as the zoning designation is changed, we give that to IDEM that says the site is now zoned residential, that is going to be the future use, so then those remedial levels apply from an IDEM evaluation standpoint, and they're the ones that dictate how much cleanup is done. I can't tell whomever to clean anything up. IDEM is the one who is the gatekeeper. They're the one saying, okay, now it's residential, these are the new levels down here.
So it's not like we need to come up with a new plan. That's in place. They're just waiting for new standards.
Right, and
They
then,
get kicked in.
and then Wilcox would have to do more work. So it's not a money grab by EnviroForensics or us or anyone. Wilcox will be doing more work to get that contamination levels lower.
I think I hit all the notes I kept here.
I do encourage you guys on the virtual file cabinet, there's a lot of documents about the site. If you read through everything, not just selected snippets, but all the back and forth, it sort of fills in the bigger picture of what's been going on here. Back to December of last year, when the EnviroForensics remediation work plan to residential standards went in, from that point forward, all the back and forth has been geared towards this site is going to be residential because that's what we think. We would like it cleaned up so that we can do the zoning change. IDEM said, we have to do the zoning change first, then we'll evaluate the cleanup on those residential standards, which is why we came to you guys and said, we'd like to do the zoning change first. And it's a little unorthodox, but that's kind of the way it needs to be to get this cleaned up. So.
I'm now open for questions from the commission.
So what I'm getting is, no matter what, the cleanup process is going to start at the same time, whether it's residential or commercial. Depending on the zoning, is going to be the level of remediation will occur. So no matter what, it's going to start at the same pace. We're just looking at a better level of remediation with residential.
Yeah, we've been in contact with Wilcox and IDEM, and Wilcox is working for the responsible party and getting a cleanup started on that as quickly as possible.
Out of curiosity, how quick is it going to happen?
That's up to Wilcox. They're the ones doing the work. So how quickly can they get their subcontractors lined up and get their ejection amendments and get out there and start doing the work? You know, these are water-based amendments. So they basically mix it above ground and inject into the ground. Being the fact that it's winter in Northwest Indiana, I would like to think they're innovative and can get out there and do it, but it would be cheaper for them to wait until spring. So if they wait until spring, I would not be surprised. So.
How long does the injection process take once it starts?
The limited amount of work they're currently proposing out there, within 2 weeks, they'd be done with the injection work.
Okay, and in the enhanced level, or do it take more than?
It would take up to a month to do more injection points across a larger portion of the site.
When has Wilcox been on the property? And why did they stop working on your property?
So this is spelled out. There's a lettered item from legal counsel that kind of spells this out in there, because item asked the same question. After Portage Properties LLC had bought the property, they were negotiating access agreement with council for Wilcox for storing of hazardous waste, for coming on site, if anything's broken, you know, the sort of what that would entail. And the property management company made a visit to the site, found that Wilcox was already trespassing on the property. And council got in touch with their council, and it sort of devolved into a situation of they could not come to appropriate access terms. So once Wilcox stopped fulfilling the environmental requirements for item, then Portage Properties LLC, on their own dime, hired EnviroForensics to fill those, install monitoring wells, collect samples, generate reports. Multiple reports were submitted to item from work done on the site property itself. So it's not that nothing has been done, it's just that EnviroForensics has been doing the work since Portage Properties LLC purchased the property.
Is part of the plan tearing down the existing structure?
We, at this point in time, feel that from a residential reuse standpoint, a new structure is going to be required. We'd be interested in hearing input from you guys, but that would be.
I don't think that was the question.
Okay.
Why don't you try again? I think your question was, is the building coming down? Yeah.
I mean, from a residential reuse standpoint,
Okay, is the building coming down in a year or two?
there are no plans currently to demolish the building until we figure out, you know, what a redevelopment reuse situation is going to look like.
Thank you. A lot's been said. There's a lot of history and there's a lot of feelings, right? There's a lot of information that was provided, a lot of official documents from IDEM and legal counsel and so on and so forth. I think the staff report's recommendation stands very true, unlike some of the comments that we don't know what we're talking about. An environmental remediation to the highest standard possible for the residents of the city of Portage is the end goal, full stop. With that said, there's a lot that needs to be better understood, because Wilcox isn't here, IDEM isn't here, and we're characterizing what they're saying in letters and emails without fully reading letters and possibly cherry picking. What I think is important is staff, legal counsel, the time to go through this, to reach out to Mr. Stephen Thill with the IDEM as their section chief and Office of Legal Counsel to find out what's going on. I think us as a jurisdiction within the state of Indiana needs to speak with our state officials in this department, as they are very well-versed in what is required ultimately for what's best for the residents of Portage or the state of Indiana. So what I would say at this point is, if it's your pleasure and you would prefer to defer action for a period of time to allow legal counsel and I the opportunity to dive into this matter, we would request that time. If you would prefer to move forward with a recommendation to, you know, to move this thing immediately forward, that's of course your pleasure. So I do think you have a couple options. Scott, you agree with that?
I do.
I'll make a motion to table the issue and give staff and legal counsel ample time to research.
I will second that.
We have a motion and a second.
It's been a while since we voted.
I know.
So A lot of comments have been offered. There's comments here too. Pardon me, the motion,
Motion to table this to give opportunity to staff and legal counsel to research.
in the second,
Yes, I second.
thank you. Roll call.
Call roll.
Yes, I will now. Tom Cherry,
Yes.
Gina Geishurst,
Yes.
Sam LaBoy,
Yes.
Charles Meyer,
Yes.
Hortensia Moreno,
Yes.
Charles Thompson,
Yes.
Kevin Witherspoon,
Yes.
Denise Little,
Yes.
Can I state I want to thank everyone for voicing.
Was there a finding, I don't know if a finding is required.
Can you speak in the,
Oh,
we
yeah,
can't
yeah,
hear you up there.
sorry. Is there a finding required that the public notice requirements were met? I just wanted to at least
No.
have that note. No, okay.
Nope.
Okay. But we do not, we're not required to renotice for when we come back, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And neighbors would,
Well, no, hold on, we didn't continue it to a date certain, we tabled it.
we tabled it.
So,
They'll want to watch our agendas.
what's that?
They'll want to watch our notice for agendas.
Yeah, we're gonna have to have some sort of notice beyond just that. So, and that may not be advertising notice, but, we're going to have to, you know what? Have we already gabbled out?
no. You said it.
To keep us out of the notice problem, I guess I would see whether or not the board would consider amending it to a continue instead of a table. The problem with a table is if it's a continue to a date certain, even if it's not enough time and say 30 days for to have the work complete that's been requested, it's easier then to continue it for another 30 days because it's a date certain and we lose the notice problem. If it's tabled to a date uncertain, then we have a notice problem down the road, and then we get into who does what and where, and what encompasses that notice.
I'll amend my motion to continue to date certain to give legal and staff ample opportunity to research.
So the next meeting?
Would you have time
Well-
holidays?
It's gonna be hard, but at least it's
Or,
date certain.
or
February.
pick February then. Or January.
The holidays,
I think
People
to
are
get the
mentally-
feedback, and I hate to
We
have
definitely
these,
want everyone on the same page, so I think February works best.
and we
Okay.
hate to have these folks come back in January and then say,
I want
oh,
them
by
to
the
know."
way, you have to come back in
Right.
February, yeah. We'd like to get it right.
This, is it Planning Commission? Okay, February 6th? Okay. Yeah, with the holidays, we're doing February 6th. Okay, so the date's certain, so this would be a motion to continue this matter till the February 6th, 2003 Plan Commission meeting.
Yes.
So everyone that's here, February 6th, whether or not it gets continued again, something will happen that night. for
do we
this
have to
case.
amend your motion? We had a
Okay.
second.
And we should vote on that.
Yes.
So we had a motion to table, it was seconded, approved, 8-0. Council's recommendation is to change that to a continuance, so we would need to go through the procedure to make that change.
I make a motion to continue to January 6th,
February.
or I'm sorry, February 6th,
Yes.
to give staff and legal
Okay.
time.
And I second that.
Okay.
Yeah, I
The
second
second
that.
agrees? Okay.
Roll call, please.
Yes, roll.
Yes, Tom Cherry,
Yes.
Gina Geishurst,
Yes.
Sam LaBoy,
Yes.
Charles Meyer,
Yes.
Hortensia Moreno,
Yes.
Charles Thompson,
Yes.
Kevin Witherspoon,
Yes.
Denise Little.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all, appreciate it.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
Yeah, we're done? Okay.
And just so you know.